Imagine standing on an ancient battlefield, thousands of soldiers facing each other. Not chaos, but order. Lines, shields,
We march for
spears.
glory!
In war, victory has rarely belonged to the strongest. It belongs to the most organized. War, at its core, has always been a test of organization as much as it is a test of strength. Across thousands of years, the difference between victory and defeat has often hinged not on the number of soldiers, but on how effectively they were arranged, coordinated, and commanded. Military formations are the backbone of warfare. They turn scattered individuals into a single disciplined force capable of overwhelming their enemies. From the earliest days of human conflict, formations evolved alongside the societies that created them. In the dawn of warfare, during ancient times, combat was often fragmented and decentralized. Early armies were divided into small, loosely connected groups. These included archers, skirmishers, and light infantry. These units operated with a degree of independence, relying heavily on ambush tactics, mobility, and surprise rather than coordinated maneuvers. There was little sense of a unified battlefield structure. Instead, engagements resembled chaotic clashes where initiative at the individual or small group level determined outcomes. As civilizations grew more complex, so too did their methods of warfare. By the medieval period, armies began to adopt more structured hierarchies. Units were organized into groups of roughly 10 to 50 soldiers, each led by a commander responsible for maintaining discipline and executing orders. This shift marked a crucial step toward coordinated warfare. Infantry and cavalry units became more specialized, and commanders could begin to synchronize movements across multiple units, creating the early foundations of formation-based combat. The Renaissance period brought even greater sophistication. Armies began integrating multiple types of forces: infantry, cavalry, archers, and early firearms units into cohesive systems. These forces no longer acted independently. Instead, they were coordinated within larger formations that could adapt to changing battlefield conditions. Command structures became more layered and centralized, allowing for complex maneuvers and combined arms tactics. This period laid the groundwork for modern military doctrine, where coordination between different branches of the military became essential. In today's world, despite the introduction of advanced technologies such as drones, missiles, and cyber warfare, the fundamental concept of formations remains deeply relevant. Modern armies still rely on structured arrangements, whether in infantry squads, armored divisions, naval fleets, or aerial formations, to execute operations effectively. Even law enforcement and riot control units continue to train in formations that trace their origins back to ancient times. The persistence of these structures speaks to their enduring effectiveness. Among the most iconic and influential formations in history is the phalanx, a system that exemplifies the power of unity and discipline. Popularized by ancient Greek city-states between approximately 750 and 350 BCE, the phalanx was a tightly packed formation of heavily armed infantry known as hoplites. Each soldier carried a large shield and a long spear, standing shoulder to shoulder with his comrades to form an unbroken wall of shields and spear points. The strength of the phalanx lay in its cohesion. Soldiers were arranged in multiple ranks, often 8 or more rows deep. The front ranks would present their spears forward to engage the enemy directly, while those behind provided additional pressure and reinforcement. This layering created a formidable force, capable of pushing back opposing troops through sheer collective momentum. The interlocking shields not only protected individual soldiers, but also created a defensive barrier that was difficult to penetrate. Historical evidence suggests that formations resembling the phalanx may have existed even earlier than classical Greece. Ancient carvings from Mesopotamia, dating back to around 2450 BCE, depict soldiers equipped with spears and large shields arranged in organized ranks. Similar practices have been observed in ancient Egypt. However, it was the Greeks who refined and standardized the phalanx into a dominant military system. The effectiveness of the phalanx was demonstrated in several pivotal battles, such as the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE and the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE. In these engagements, disciplined Greek infantry formations were able to defeat numerically superior forces through superior organization and tactical execution. The psychological impact of a solid wall of shields advancing in unison cannot be overstated. It was both a physical and moral weapon. However, the phalanx was not without its limitations. Its strength depended heavily on maintaining formation integrity. If the line was broken or disrupted by uneven terrain, flanking maneuvers, or missile fire, the entire structure could collapse into disarray. Additionally, its rigidity made it difficult to adapt quickly to changing battlefield conditions. Soldiers were trained to fight as part of a unit, not as individuals, which limited their effectiveness in more fluid combat scenarios. To address some of these weaknesses, variations of the phalanx were developed. One notable example is the Macedonian phalanx, which used longer spears known as sarissas and often deployed in deeper formations, sometimes up to 16 ranks or more. This increased reach and depth made the formation even more formidable in frontal engagements, though it further reduced mobility. Interestingly, the concept of densely packed formations persisted even into the age of firearms. In the early modern period, when muskets were slow to reload and relatively inaccurate, soldiers were arranged in tight lines to maximize the volume of fire. By firing in coordinated volleys, multiple ranks could maintain a near-continuous stream of bullets, compensating for individual weapon limitations. This approach dominated European battlefields well into the early 19th century, until advancements in rifle technology and the introduction of machine guns rendered such dense formations dangerously vulnerable. Despite its eventual decline, the legacy of the phalanx is undeniable. It demonstrated that discipline, coordination, and collective action could transform ordinary soldiers into an unstoppable force. It also set the stage for future innovations in military organization, influencing the development of subsequent formations that would go on to dominate battlefields for centuries. In later developments, even the most powerful systems are eventually challenged and surpassed. The phalanx, for all its strengths, would ultimately meet its match in a new and more flexible approach to warfare, one that prioritized adaptability, individual capability, and tactical versatility. In the next part, we will explore how a rising power reshaped the art of war by breaking away from rigid formations and introducing a system that would come to define military dominance for centuries: the Roman legion. If the Greek phalanx represented unity through rigidity, then the Roman legion embodied strength through adaptability. As warfare evolved, so too did the demands placed upon armies, and no force in the ancient world responded to those demands more effectively than the legions of Rome. Their rise marked a turning point in military history, demonstrating that flexibility, discipline, and organization at multiple levels could outperform even the most formidable traditional formations. The Roman legion was not merely a formation, it was a system. Unlike the densely packed phalanx, which relied on maintaining a continuous front, the legion was divided into smaller, semi-independent units. At its core were formations known as maniples and later cohorts, each composed of well-trained soldiers capable of operating both as part of a larger force and as independent tactical elements. A standard legion could be broken down into centuries, each consisting of approximately 80 men, commanded by experienced officers who ensured cohesion and discipline under pressure. This modular structure allowed Roman forces to maneuver across uneven terrain, respond to threats from multiple directions, and adapt to rapidly changing battlefield conditions. Where the phalanx struggled on rough ground or when its lines were disrupted, the Roman legion thrived. Soldiers were equipped with large rectangular shields and short swords, weapons that proved highly effective in close combat. The short sword, in particular, required less space to wield than a long spear, allowing Roman soldiers to fight efficiently even in confined or chaotic situations. The historian Polybius famously analyzed this contrast, noting that the phalanx was powerful only under ideal conditions, flat terrain, unbroken lines, and disciplined cohesion, while the Roman system could function effectively in a far wider range of scenarios. This adaptability proved decisive in numerous conflicts, enabling Rome to expand its influence across vast territories and maintain control over diverse and often hostile environments. One of the defining strengths of the legion was its endurance. Roman soldiers underwent rigorous training, not only in combat but also in marching long distances, constructing fortifications, and maintaining formation discipline under extreme stress. On the battlefield, they employed a rotation system. Frontline soldiers would engage the enemy until fatigued, then fall back and be replaced by fresh troops from the rear. This continuous cycle allowed Roman forces to sustain pressure over extended periods, gradually wearing down their opponents. The effectiveness of this system was demonstrated in key battles such as Pharsalus in 48 BCE, where the forces of Julius Caesar defeated a numerically superior army through superior tactics and discipline. Another example is the Siege of Alesia, where Roman engineering, coordination, and formation flexibility enabled them to withstand attacks from both inside and outside their lines simultaneously. These victories were not accidents. They were the result of a military doctrine that emphasized preparation, adaptability, and unity of command. But history had other plans. New technologies once again reshaped the battlefield. The widespread adoption of firearms introduced both opportunities and challenges. Early muskets were slow to reload and lacked accuracy, which led commanders to revive dense formations, this time not with spears, but with guns. Soldiers were arranged in lines several ranks deep, firing in coordinated volleys to maximize firepower. This method, while effective in its time, required strict discipline and exposed troops to significant risk as weapons improved. One particularly notable formation from this period is the infantry square. Designed primarily as a defense against cavalry, the square formation arranged soldiers into a hollow square, with each side facing outward. Bayonets and muskets created a defensive perimeter that was difficult for cavalry to penetrate. Inside the square, commanders could position reserves, supplies, and even artillery. The effectiveness of this formation was clearly demonstrated during the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. British infantry, facing repeated cavalry charges from French forces, formed disciplined squares that held firm under pressure. Cavalry, despite its speed and power, found it nearly impossible to break through these organized defensive structures without support from infantry or artillery. However, the square formation also had its vulnerabilities. If disrupted by artillery fire, terrain obstacles, or loss of cohesion, it could quickly collapse, leaving soldiers exposed. Like the phalanx before it, its effectiveness depended on maintaining structure and discipline. Another enduring formation is the wedge, or triangular formation often used for offensive operations. This formation concentrated force at a single point, allowing troops, particularly cavalry, to break through enemy lines. The tip of the wedge would strike into the enemy formation, creating a breach that could then be exploited by following forces. This tactic was used effectively by various groups throughout history, including the Vikings and the forces of Alexander the Great, who employed wedge formations in decisive battles such as Gaugamela. The wedge formation's principle, concentrating force to achieve a breakthrough, remains relevant even in modern warfare. Today, it can be seen in armored spearhead tactics, where tanks and mechanized infantry focus on penetrating enemy defenses at critical points. Similarly, riot control units may use wedge-like formations to disperse crowds, demonstrating how ancient concepts continue to influence contemporary practices. As warfare entered the modern age, formations became more dispersed due to the increased lethality of weapons. Soldiers could no longer afford to stand shoulder to shoulder in dense lines. Instead, formations evolved into flexible, combined arm systems that integrate multiple types of forces, infantry, armor, artillery, and air power, into coordinated operations. These formations are designed to leverage the strengths of each component while compensating for their weaknesses. For example, an armored advance might involve tanks leading the assault, supported by infantry to secure territory, artillery to suppress enemy positions, and aircraft providing reconnaissance and air support. This layered approach reflects a fundamental continuation of the principles seen in earlier formations: coordination, mutual support, and strategic alignment. Even in non-military contexts, the influence of historical formations persists. Law enforcement agencies around the world continue to train in structured formations for crowd control and emergency response. Many of these techniques can be traced directly back to ancient military practices, adapted to suit modern needs. Ultimately, the story of military formations is one of continuous evolution. From the tightly packed ranks of the phalanx to the flexible structure of the Roman legion, from the defensive squares of the Napoleonic era to the dynamic combined arms tactics of today, each stage reflects a response to the challenges of its time. Technology may change, but the underlying need for organization, discipline, and coordination remains constant. As we reflect on this journey, an interesting question emerges. Which formation truly deserves to be called the most effective in history? Is it the unyielding strength of the phalanx, the adaptability of the Roman legion, or the integrated power of modern military systems? The answer may depend on how we define effectiveness, whether by dominance in a specific era or by lasting influence across centuries. And now, returning to the question posed earlier. If the typical Greek phalanx had a depth of 8 ranks, how deep was the famed Macedonian variation? The correct answer is 16 ranks, twice as deep and significantly more formidable in frontal combat. Military formations may have changed over time, but their core principles remain the same: organization, coordination, and discipline. Understanding these systems helps us understand not just how wars were fought, but why they were won. If you found this exploration insightful and engaging, consider sharing your thoughts in the comments. Which formation do you believe had the greatest impact on military history? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who are passionate about strategy and history. Your support helps Strategy Scope continue delivering in-depth, thoughtful content that brings the past into clearer focus for the present.